corruption has always been an issue and has always been on the sort of policy agenda in Mexico. But in recent years, it really appears to have had a major uptick in emphasis. Why is that? And what's happened to elevate the issue? We'll begin with you, Lourdes.
Well, thanks a lot for the invitation and the kind presentation. I don't feel myself like an important leader. I'm only part of a project. Oh, no? You hear? A project named the Accountability Network. That is a project created at the Center for Research and Technology, Center for Research and Teaching in Economics. That's a university, a public university. And we created this project to join efforts from civil society organizations, from academic institutions, and some public institutions. This is an uncommon effort because on a country when trust through institutions and through government is not very common, this network has helped to build proposals for an accountability public policy. So why corruption matters particularly now? What happened in Mexico for the last few years? Well, I think that measures about corruption, measures such as the one made by Transparency International and other index, show that corruption hasn't improved. I mean, the curtailment and the policies against corruption hasn't shown the outcomes that we wish they had. And what happened on the last summer is that two things triggered a huge mobilization. The first one was a corruption case that happened in 2014, a corruption case linking the First Lady to a possible conflict of interest with a house where she was living with the president, and with a contract with some enterprise that apparently benefited from the relationship with the president. These enterprises received a lot of public contracting, and this, after a research made by a journalist, a very well-known journalist called Carmen Aristegui, showed the limits of the law for dealing with conflict of interest. The other thing was the Ayotzinapa case, where 43 students got arrested and then disappeared with the convenience of the local police in the state of Guerrero, one of the most poorest states in the country. So this context triggered indignation, social indignation, and joined two agendas that normally were treated separately. The first agenda is the agenda of human rights respect and human rights activists, and the other agenda is the agenda of transparency and corruption. I must say that corruption was an issue concerning mainly people from the private sector and some well-educated people. It was not an issue that was mobilizing the general society. But we heard a lot of scandals. We usually hear a lot of scandals about corruption, about conflict of interest, about governors misusing public money, and nothing happens. So these two phenomena, these two cases, may join these agendas into the fight against impunity. And that's where corruption became the main issue in the public agenda.
If you could, just impunity as is a special term, a special significance. Could you explain for the audience what you mean by impunity?
Yes. I mean impunity from the point of view of a lack of consequences. People got disappeared, governors misuse the public funds, and nothing happens. We hear the scandals, and we do not see investigations. We don't see anyone going to jail. It just happens. And casually, during the first years after the year 2000, when we changed of political party at the presidential level, when we thought that we had finally got into a democratic system, we thought that transparency was going to be the antidote against corruption. And reality shows that transparency only gave us more information about these cases, and normally it became like a social vaccine. You get used to the scandals. You get used to impunity. So when I talk about impunity, I talk about lack of responsibility and lack of consequences when you violate the law. And do you want me to tell the story after what happened?
Please,
okay.
Yes.
So that was the general picture of Mexico. After these cases, an initial discussion that had started at the beginning of the government of the actual president, Enrique Peña Nieto, about how to curtail corruption was activated. When he got in office, he made 3 huge promises to the population. The first one is that he was going to improve transparency, and he was going to launch a particular reform to make transparency happen in all the 3 levels of government. He also promised to create a commission for monitoring public spending in publicity, the official publicity, when we spend a lot of money without controls and without accountability. And the third promise was to create an anti-corruption agency, a single agency to finally curtail corruption. He went in office and he made a coalition with the main political parties represented in the Congress, that is the right-wing political party, the PAN, the left-wing political party, the PRD, and the Centro party, his political party, the PRI. Then he made the Pact for Mexico, and he launched 12 ambitious reforms, including the one about transparency. In the first year of office, these reforms were approved. It was quite impressive. And international press talked about the Mexican moment, the miracle. We are finally getting into a modernized country where investment can come. One of the more polemic reforms was about the energy sector. We opened the energy sector for foreign investment, so everyone was sort of happy. But besides these changes, at the state level, violence increased, and the lack of rule of law made possible that for the first years we had registered more than 12,000 disappearances and killings in the States. Disappearances, people that got disappeared. Disappearances, yes. So after these scandals, I'm going to 2014, the issue, the reform about corruption wasn't discussed yet, was activated. The response of the government, because of demonstrations in the street, because of the anger of people telling the government that corruption was really the main issue that wasn't faced yet, activated a huge discussion at the Congress. 2 organizations that are part of the accountability network, that is Mexican Transparency and the Institute for Mexican Competitiveness, launched an initiative for the midterm election of 2015 that wanted to put some pressure on the candidates to make 3 public declarations. The first one was the asset declaration. The second one, the fiscal declaration, that is, if they pay taxes or not, and the possible conflict of interest declaration. This third one was related to the scandal of the First Lady. They made that to put some pressure on the candidates, but they couldn't force them to do that. They just put the message in the public debate. Some of them did it. Some of them presented these 3 declarations to get elected, but others didn't. With this situation on the country, the Congress approved the constitutional reform that made possible the creation of an anti-corruption system. Before that, the debate was, we do not need a particular commission, an anti-corruption agency, a single institution to curtail such a complex problem such as corruption, but we do need something, an institutional basis that could enact at least 3 things. The first one is that we need to reinforce the check and balances, so institutional cooperation is needed to face the problem of corruption. The second one is that if we focus only on particular corruption cases and we go only to chase corrupt people, this is going to fail, because we need to monitor and to know what causes corruption. And the third one is what we call institutional intelligence. That is, this part for monitoring the loopholes and the legal things that made corruption happen. So with that context, we approved the constitutional reform, and people mobilize to push more things to get consequences against corrupt people.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. Marco,